I'm Greg Diegas of the MIT Club of Northern California Clean Technology Program. I want to thank you for coming, and we'd like to begin with thanking lots of people. Certainly Wilson Sonsini, who's a sponsor of our club for a number of years, and Google, that has made these most colorful and lavish accommodations available to us. We thank them for this excellent facility. We're working with the German American Business Association, but before I introduce Philip, I wanted to just acknowledge some of the volunteers here. Deepak Bogavarapu, who's thought it was his conception to have these two series of solar events that we've held today in San Francisco and here. John Rethens, who arranged the facility. And Laura, where's Laura? Laura, who does our PR. Okay. All right, so Philip, please.
Thank you, Greg. Hi there, welcome here to this beautiful site here at Google. My name is Philip Koontz. I'm the chair of the GABA Clean Tech Industry Group. And first of all, I want to thank our colleagues from the MIT CNC Club, because I really think this great collaboration between two organizations that have different links could bring different strengths and different people to this event really made this possible and made this such a great day already, and I'm sure we're going to continue right now. Of course, I also want to thank Google for the excellent food they put out here, and the fact that they even allow us to videotape this, and the videotape will be out on the internet tomorrow, hopefully. And every one of you who kind of wants to listen to some of the arguments that Hermann is going to make later on, again, can certainly do that. I also want to thank some of the people behind GABA who have really made this happen. One is Caroline Reynaud, the president of GABA. Another one is Bianca Lautenschläger, who was the good soul behind all the RSVPs and everything. Without her, we would have been completely lost. And then there's some more people in the back over there who don't want to come to the front. Katie and Vanessa and Alex Schley, who's helping us tonight. Thank you very, very much. I'm particularly grateful, and Dirk will say one more word about him, that Martin Roscheisen has kind of signed up to do the introduction of Hermann Scheer. Martin, as you know, is CEO and founder of Nano Solar, one of the success stories in solar here in the Valley, with great funding rounds and good news flow. And we're particularly happy for one reason that Mr. Scheer mentioned today during an investor luncheon in the city in San Francisco. The continuation of the German feed-in-tariff law really depends on success stories like Nano Solar doing amazing stuff here in the Bay Area, but also coming to Germany and doing things over there and creating jobs over there, because that's what the general public, that's what the politicians are looking for, to continue this program that was so successful in the past and which we hope will be equally successful in the future. So without any more notes, I'll pass over to Dirk Michaels, K&L Gates, who's been the sponsor of this and has, through Vanessa and Katie, has helped us a great deal with putting this all together. Dirk.
Thanks, Philip. Thank you. I'm going to make it short and swift. Happy to see all of you, many clients, many friends, and many future clients and friends, hopefully. Clean tech has become the theme in the Silicon Valley. My question is whether we are going to know the Silicon Valley or the San Francisco Bay Area as Clean Tech Bay in 5 years, and not that much as Silicon Valley. I think that history is going to show that. Certainly, I'm very happy to be personally part of it and be with a firm that is a part of it. K&L Gates, 1,400 attorneys from Hong Kong to Berlin and everywhere in between. We have years of experience in energy. We have been doing energy, alternative and dirty energy projects for the last 25, 30 years. For me personally, it's a very great pleasure to see that alternative energy, clean tech, has become prime time in the Silicon Valley, because that allows me to use my hobby of project financing for wind and solar energy projects and to marry it with my job, and that is working with my emerging growth clients, which I just love, and VCs, and make them successful. And I hope that all of you who are with emerging growth clients in the clean tech area will be vastly successful in the next years, as successful as Nano Solar. I think Martin Roscheisen doesn't need any further introduction. In this young industry of clean tech, he has become almost something like an icon. So let me just hand it over to Martin, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone. I'd like to give the Silicon Valley-centric introduction to Hermann Scheer, which is start out by contrasting Hermann with Al Gore. So I love Al Gore, but you cannot start a company and build a business around speeches around global warming. You just cannot. You know, no customer is going to buy solar panels or install systems around general concerns on climate change over tens of years. What it requires is are successful policies that level the playing field against highly subsidized nuclear and coal sources, and policies that are working. Now in particular at Google here, a lot of people understand the difference between getting something right and getting something close to right, or i.e. not getting it right. And there have been a lot of policies throughout in the world, and it started in Japan, a very successful solar programs that led to massive solar installations. But it was done in a kind of a closed Japanese way. You know, in Silicon Valley, if you have a company here or in the rest of the world, you cannot build a business around selling panels into Japan, because it's a closed market. There have been a tremendous amount of city-based and state-level-based programs around the world in different countries that would level the playing field and incent solar installations. But at the end of the day, they are not, in the aggregate of them and in terms of their predictability, they weren't at the type of scale that's required for doing very aggressive, the Silicon Valley scale investments in research and development that at times takes years and years for the really the technologies that take solar from a $500 a square meter economics down to a $50 per square meter economics. It takes years of research and development, and it takes we're going to use our close to $200 million in capital quite well to get to that point, but it takes substantial investments in these areas. And those type of investments that look ahead for 5-6 years, they require a market at the end of the day that's predictable, and that's at a very interesting scale. And that's what Hermann accomplished in Germany. It's the first example of a very elegant and simple tariff that gets it right in terms of predictability, scale, and ultimately accomplishing nothing else but making green tech investable, including very R&D intense investments. And just to see a few things about the current feed-in tariff we have in Germany is the outgrowth of a number of programs. Started with the Hermann as long back as '93 started the one of the first large-scale solar installation programs, which was the 100,000 rooftop program in Germany, which I had heard earlier Greenpeace at that time called unrealistic, that at most it should be at most 50,000. So it's you welcome to Silicon Valley for your audacity. You know, it's good to be called back by Greenpeace as being too green, but it turned out that the $100,000 rooftop program was fully subscribed between '99 and '03, and it was kind of predecessor to the feed-in program that's now in place, and that applies to both wind and solar installations, and has led to something like 15-16 gigawatt of installations at this point. And really around the globe, unleashing a market dynamic that's going to fundamentally change the gestalt of green energy in many countries around the world. As well as a third policy effort also around in the area of biofuels, achieving a general tax exemption for biofuels, which makes a very significant difference in a country where the fuel prices are a factor higher than we have it in the United States here, and again leveling the playing field for new technologies. So without further delay, please welcome the man who made green tech investable.
Okay, thank you, Martin. From Albert Einstein, I know a sentence he has written in this last year, in the mid of the 50s. And the sentence is, the methods who have caused our problems are unable to solve these problems. And if we look to the global situation and the running energy crisis, one point is very clear for me, and I hope after my speech also for you. The present energy economy, the present dominating energy economists, their ways of thinking and acting is unable to solve the problem we have. We need a consideration why we are aware more and more by the energy crisis, why we are aware of an existential problems for civilization in general, but why happen so few things? What happens in policies and economy that there is no adequate reaction to the energy crisis? That means we have also to reconsider the strategies and policies which were done in the past, including the policies for climate protection, including the Kyoto Protocol. All these steps are far below the real necessities. The International Panel on Climate Change, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, recommends an urgent reduction in a total amount of CO2 emissions, in a total amount of 60% up to 2050. And in the same, this on the basis of the year 1990. The Kyoto Protocol, which is in power up to 2012, rules only a reduction of 6%. And it is not an obligation for all, because some countries, including the United States of America, were able to deny that, not to participate in this protocol. But even if all would participate, including also the countries which are not asked to participate, like China and India, if they all would take part and they all would reduce the emissions about 6% up to 2012, it would be far beyond the necessities. And who can imagine that in the same process of political acting, there could be an approaching to the necessity of the reduction of 60%? Who can imagine that, if someone wants to be realistic? Again, this shows we need other considerations, other ways of acting, Otherwise, we would lose the race against time. And we are aware of 7, not only 1, world energy crisis. One is the climate crisis. A second is the availability crisis, which would exist even if there would be no climate crisis caused by fossil energy pollutions or emissions. The availability crisis comes by the running depletion, the coming depletion of the fossil energy resources, and even the running depletion of the uranium reserves for nuclear facilities. And if we look to the real problem, if we tell the truth about the energy situation in the world, we have to recognize that there is a decreasing curve of reserves, and it decreases faster the more the energy consumption increases. And we have an increase of the energy consumption in the world, mainly because of the developments in China and India, where 1/3 of world population live. 1/3. And if we have a decreasing curve and an increasing curve of demands and a decreasing of possible supplyings, then we approach to a crossing point of both curves. If we would arrive at this point, the world would get the most brutal, bloody conflict ever happened. Because without energy, nothing works. Nothing is possible. And on the way to this crossing point, there will be many, many conflicts. The time of energy wars has begun. Not whether the Gulf War nor the Iraq War would have happened if there would be the plantation of bananas instead of the extraction of oil at the Arabian Peninsula. There's no doubt about that. And the economic conflicts will become more and more heavy. Because if we approach to this curve, to this crossing point of the two curves, then energy will become more and more expensive for all. It creates a social problem for all countries. It becomes social hypothek. And it is still, this is the third crisis, a social hypothek for the third world countries. 40 countries in the third world, I have counted, pay for the importation of oil more than their total export earning is. That means speaking about the third world crisis without referring to the energy problem means nothing, to understand nothing about the third world crisis. The only chance for them is to shift as soon and as radical as possible, as wide as possible, to indigenous renewable energies. But even their elites do think that this would be an economic burden. It is a total misleading thinking, misleaded thinking, totally. And these are 3 world crises caused by the present energy system. A 4th one is the nuclear crisis. The extension of nuclear technology creates more and more problems about nuclear weapons proliferation. The danger for nuclear proliferation is much higher than it has been 15 years before, much higher. Look to the Iran crisis, look to the situation in North Korea, look to other countries. And the idea to organize a nuclear renaissance, and that in countries which are not stable, because a stable country, a stable situation is the absolute prerequisite for having nuclear powers. To appeal for nuclear renaissance in the world in general for overcoming the climate crisis is totally stupid and totally irresponsible, because you don't have the social and political conditions for that. Besides that, it is a lie that nuclear doesn't contribute to the climate crisis, because nuclear power stations produce many heat which would not be there in the atmosphere without the nuclear powers. And the global warming effect is based on the increasing difficulties in the atmosphere because of the mounting of the CO2 emissions, that the heat cannot leave the atmosphere like it happened before with solar heat. Therefore, also nuclear is a source of the global warming, beside a lot of other questions, but I don't want to speak too much about that non-option. And all who appeal for a nuclear renaissance don't tell the truth about the real costs, the real direct costs, because even the uranium depletes. And if someone wants to prolongate nuclear, he must tell the truth that this would mean immediately to go over to the fast breeder technology. And nowhere in the world exists one operational, well-functioning fast breeder reactor. And if it would exist, it would cost much more than the present nuclear power facilities. Therefore, it is a myth to speak about the future opportunity of having cheap nuclear energy. And then we have a fifth crisis caused by the conventional energies, by nuclear and by fossil energy. This is the high water consumption rate of this energy system. In the United States, statistics, you have a water consumption by the present energy system, mainly by the heat power plants. And all big power plants are based on the steam processes, if it is nuclear or if it are coal power plants. And they need so much water that the water consumption of the energy system, the present energy system, is in America more than 50% of the total water consumption. And now look to many countries which are in the mid of a water crisis which increases. And therefore there is no future for the present energy system because of the water in more and more countries. And then you have a health crisis caused not by the climate problems, but caused by the other pollutions of the present energy. And you have an agricultural crisis caused by the petrochemical fertilizers. One of the main sources of the agricultural crisis is the increasing loss of humus potential on our globe. Each reason is enough for itself a reason to change the energy system, to change to renewables. And all together culminate in the same time and overlap each other in the same time, because they have the same origin or close origins. And that means we are in a race against time. And this race against time is not really contradictable. If we look to the two main limits in general of the present energy system, you have the limit of the reserves, and on the other side you have unlimited reserves by renewable energies. All are derivatives from the solar radiation, from the actual solar radiation for our globe. Therefore, this is the first big difference. Limited reserves, and on the other side, as long the sun exists, an energy source for our globe, which is 15,000 times the daily supply of the sun to our globe, is 15,000 times higher than the daily fossil and nuclear energy consumption is. To say there would be not enough potential, natural potential of renewable energies in order to replace the conventional energies is ridiculous. Has nothing to do with science. Has only to do with prejudicial standpoints and nothing else. With non-scientifically assumptions in the energy debate. And the energy forever, it is sometimes defined. This is not totally right. The science of the astrophysics tells us that the sun will exist for 5 to 7 billion years more. One time when I gave this number, one asked me afterwards, did you say 5 billion or 5 million years? When I said it is 5 billion, then he answered, then I'm satisfied. This is the first big difference. And the time of the running out is shorter than many people think. And then the conventional experts confirm. And they don't confirm it because the answer is too radical for them, which should be given to that. If we look to the oil reserves, we can expect that the liquid oil reserves will run out in the next roughly 4 decades. Roughly 4 decades. The natural gas reserves are not longer. Perhaps it could be 5 years less. Perhaps it could be 5 years more. But this doesn't make a difference. The uranium reserves, based on the present number of nuclear facilities, perhaps 50 or 60 years, on the present number of nuclear facilities. Coal, a little bit more than 100. But who can imagine that after the exploitation, the final exploitation of the other sources, all would go over to coal. And to continue by that way the global pyromaniac energy system. Before the time limit of the reserves, we have another limit. This is the limit of the ecosphere. Because the ecosphere is already overstressed. That means we are not allowed to burn off all these known reserves. That means we have to replace these energy sources in the run of the next 3 or 4 decades. And this is the challenge of the century. This is the unique challenge since the beginning of in general, of civilization. Because without energy, nothing works, nothing can move. It is an existential question. And the contrast between that question, between that challenge, and the activities is scandalously. And it is not anymore enough to present warnings. I am not an enthusiast about, for instance, the movie of Al Gore. The reason for that is it doesn't show a solution. there is not one detail which is not right in the description of the dangers. Not one sentence. It's brilliant formulated. Brilliant. But I think it is a problem itself to show such a dramatic danger and not to show in the same time a solution. Because what will happen with the people who are aware of that? And if they are not aware about the opportunity or the possibility to come to a solution to overcome this danger, some may become active. But a silent majority, this is a normal historical experience, the silent majority will react in a total other way. They feel confirmed themselves that this problem can never become solved. And if they think that, they develop no future mentalities. They become apathic. They start to live from day to day as long as possible in the used way, in the usual way, or they become nihilistic. And a society can only create the power, the creativity, can only start to overcome a danger if a perspective is seen. Only then, on socio-psychological reasons, it is necessary not to leave a society alone with the danger. It is necessary to show the perspective. That means it is necessary to show that it's possible, that there is a possibility to replace nuclear and fossil energy supply in general by renewable energies. This is the challenge, to show that. From the natural potential, showing that is not a problem. I gave some indications for that. But then many energy experts say they reduce this potential and speak about, yes, but how? What is the economic potential or the technological potential? Then they reduce it radically. Then they ask, what is the economic potential? Then they give the answer, it's too expensive, and they reduce it again. But they never ask about the human potential, and this is the most important thing. To have enough human potential to overcome that problem. Because we cannot discuss this question only on cost comparisons. Who has the courage now, or will have the courage, let's say in 20 or 25 years, to tell their own children, we could have solved the problem, but it was too expensive for us. The additional cost of 3 or 4 cents per kilowatt hour for some time were too costly for us. Such an answer will become shabby, totally shabby, refer to the real problem. Therefore, we are challenged in a total other way. Much more than the energy debate shows us, and much more than the most energy experts tell us. The conventional energy experts are a part of the problem and not a part of the solution, mostly. And the reason for that is that they think in an old paradigm, in the paradigm of the existing energy system. And this paradigm misleads. And I try to explain this paradigm, this difference, because there is a third main contrast between renewables and the conventional energy system. The first was polluting energy and energy free of pollution, or emissioning energies and emission-free energies. Second, limited reserves and non-limited reserves. The third difference is the reserves, the potential of the conventional energies, we find at very few places in the world. But energy consumption is everywhere where people work and live. That means energy consumption is always decentralized. Conventional energy promotion is from the early beginning centralized because of very few reserve places. 60% of the annual oil extraction and consumption comes from only 40 giant fields in the world. Only 40. And the more we approach to the exhaustion, to the depletion, the fewer reserves there are. And from these 40 reserves, roughly 30, 3/4 are in Islamic states. From Central Asia, like Turkmenistan, to the Caucasus, like Kazakhstan, then to Iran, then to the Arabian Peninsula, and then to North Africa, like Libya, Sudan, and Nigeria. And this creates a lot of additional political problems. This creates increasing security costs. The new pipeline, which became installed in 2005 between the Caspian Sea and the Mediterranean harbor Ceyhan, is guarded day and night by 10,000 soldiers. Their costs are not in the energy bill. This is only one example. Only one example. And if we look to the disaster, the human disaster in Sudan, what is the reason? The reason are conflicting interests of some big powers, since there is the extraction of oil in the year 1999. That's the reason why there is no consensus in the United Nations Security Council between China, United States of America, and the European states. This is the truth behind that story, that bad story. And the situation we have cause of this long chain from few places to billions of customers is the conventional energy system can only become supplied by a long energy chain. This long energy chain consists of many elements. Each single element is linked with the others, and each element is a cashier. Each element. And the administrators of this system, that means the energy economy, is prisoned by its own chain. They cannot leave it. They are dependent from their own business, totally. And if we compare that with the renewable energy supplying, natural supply, renewable energy is everywhere. Not at few places, everywhere supplied by nature. In different intensities, but solar radiation is everywhere. Wind is practically in each region, more or less. Nearly everywhere you can plant or you have biomass, bioenergy. In many regions in the world you have running water capacities. In coastal regions you have wave energy or tidal energy. And nearly everywhere you have geothermal energy. And all these together are derivatives from the daily sunshine, all of them. That means the general term for all is solar. And because it is at very few places in the world, this creates, if we start to do that, a new economic development for all who do that. It is an opportunity to overcome the decoupling of the spaces of energy consumption and energy promotion which defines the present energy system by a process for the relinking of the spaces of energy consumption and energy promotion. That means, in the case of renewable energies, energy harvesting. And this makes possible for each country, or for many reasons within countries, for cities within countries, or in many cases also for individuals, to get an energy autonomy. The general formula for that, to describe that process, is for the global economy that we will arrive in a development for a globalization of technologies, because it is good if all people in the world have access to the best technologies, free of discrimination, but at the same time of regional resources. Regional resources and global regional resources markets and global technology markets. And what that means, if we look en detail to that process, then we come to a total different paradigm of the energy basis of our societies. This paradigm shows that the conventional energy system, the existing energy system, the existing energy economy can never be neutral to the different energy sources. That's impossible on physical reasons. Even if they want to be neutral, they can't. Because we have, in fact, only one decision. That is a decision about the energy source. After taking such a decision, all other follow-up decisions or consequences are coming by itself as a consequence from that decision. Because the choice for an energy decides about the question, how far are the sources? Are they far or are they close to us? They decide, is there a need for promotion, mining, extraction, and so forth, technologies or not? It decides about the question, how much infrastructure is needed for the transportation of the energy. It decides about the conversion technologies which must be introduced for the conversion of primary energy to the final energy which is used. It decides about the way of distribution of the energy, and it decides about which companies, which structure of companies is adequate to organize this process. Because a local utility or a small and medium enterprise is unable to organize the energy delivering from the Arabian Peninsula to the United States of America. This can only be done by a multinational company, only by them, and not by others. But such a big company is possibly unable to organize the supply of regional energy sources for regional needs in the same region. This is a total other business. And after the decision for the dominating existing energy system, we got an energy economy which is tailored in all its investments to fossil energies and nuclear. And all these investments need a payback. And there is no time. You cannot identify, scientifically not, whether scientifically nor then practically, you cannot identify for the whole system, because such a point doesn't exist, the point at which all invested money is paid back at the same time. Such point doesn't exist. Because the investments were done at different times. It were running investment, not at the same time. And the lifetime of the technologies are also different. That means the present energy system tends, and its protagonists tend, to prolongate it as long as possible. And it is impossible on sources reasons and technology reasons to keep the structure of this energy system, which is tailored to the conventional energy sources, to keep it, and to take renewables through this system. Because even if we use renewables, the prerequisites, the technological and economic prerequisites for that must be tailored then to renewable sources. And the difference are tremendous. The way to renewable energies is a way from, as I told, few sources in few giant fields to sources everywhere. It's a way from commercial primary energy like coal, gas, and uranium and oil to non-commercial primary energies, with the exemption of biomass. Because if you take biomass from agriculture, the agricultural work must be paid. But solar radiation and wind are primary energy free of costs. That means it is impossible to shift from the business being a seller of oil and gas to become a seller of solar radiation and wind. That means this part of the energy economy will lose its job without alternative. They can do other things, but they cannot change their role as primary energy suppliers to renewables. That's impossible on natural scientific reasons. You can imagine how many resistances come because of that against renewable energies. You can imagine, because the resistance are everywhere. And it became only possible to overcome it by strong policies. Only then. It came never by itself. It was always blocked by the conventional power structures. And moreover, it is a way from few power plants and refineries to many. Because of the lower energy density of renewable energy sources, it is impossible to replace a 1,000 megawatt reactor, nuclear power or coal-powered reactor, by a 1,000 megawatt windmill. The alternative to a 1,000 megawatt reactor are, let's say, 700 windmills, or several 10,000 rooftops, or several hundred or several dozens biogas or biomass plants. That means it is total other ownership possible and will come. It is not in the hand of few companies. It's impossible to keep renewable energy supply in the hand of few companies. It will overcome the monopolistic supplying structure by itself if it comes. They can take part, but they can never keep the present monopolistic structures if we go to renewables. And all this shows big differences. And moreover, if you have a natural supply and you are not dependent from far away resources, you can save infrastructures. That means you have other calculations. All the investments for renewable energies, with the exemption of biomass, are only investments for technologies. Only. Nothing else. Not more for fuels. And in most cases, the possibility to avoid infrastructural investments. And that means you have possibly higher initial costs, but then you have not any more fuel costs. That means you need a 10 or 15 years or 20 years calculation. And all who compare the investment costs of a conventional energy system with its further running costs for fuels, if you compare that with the investment costs for PV or for wind, you will not come to adequate results if you forget the system costs for a period of 10, 15 or 20 years. That means the longer you think about renewables, the cheaper will it be. And because there are only technology costs, the situation is that this is the experience of 200 years technological development. The renewable energy costs can only go down by new technologies, technological improvement, and by mass production of its technologies. So conventional energy costs can only go up because of the increasing fuel costs and because of the increasing environmental damages which have to be paid at one time, if not yet, and because of the increasing infrastructure and security costs in the run of the depletion of these sources. That means we are now on a watershed. If we postpone the way to renewables, then we create unsolvable energy problems in the future and unpayable problems in the future. If we don't postpone it, we can get for all the future energy security and clean energy. The decision is very clear. If we leave this question to the energy companies, which are the vested interest against renewables itself, then they have to go to renewables at a specific time, when they are at the end of their possibilities, and this will come. But this would be a postponement about 3 or 4 decades. And if we could allow that, or would allow that, we would lose worldwide the race against time. That means the answer is to create a policy which doesn't leave this question anymore, the energy decisions, to the existing energy companies, but which inspires and gives room for maneuvering the society and many investors to go straight to renewable energy investments without being dependent in that from the power structure. This is the only way to get success in a short run. The only way. And this shows the experience in Germany. The idea when we initiated the Renewable Energy Act was to organize an independent development, independent from the existing power structure. That was the reason why they fought against it, and they go on with their fight against this law. But the solution was we installed 3 elements in this Renewable Energy Act. The first element was a guaranteed access to the grid for each power supplier from renewables. Even it is a very small one with a 1 kilowatt peak photovoltaic device. If he wants to sell it for others and if he needs the grid, he has a guaranteed access to the grid, legally guaranteed. There's no more a way, an opportunity to obstruct it by the power companies. Second element, to give a guaranteed fee, because it is possible to block such a business if the grid companies pay only a low fee, which doesn't allow an investment. And therefore, we gave a guaranteed fee in a total amount which allows investments and revenues from that. And the third element is not to limit the quantity of introduction. Because only if there is no limitation of the quantity for the introduction of renewable energies, only then there are enough companies who start the production. Because a company who starts a production needs a long-term perspective. Because they never get the payback for their investment in production facilities if they have only a perspective of a 2 or 3 years program. And that means without quantity, a limitation in the quantities allows and motivates firms to extend their production, and by this way to cut the costs by mass production, by joining mass production. Exactly that happens. And therefore we created a new group, a new movement of investments and investors who were not anymore obliged, who had no reason anymore to ask for a permission, the power companies for a permission for their investments. They can do it without asking someone. And the result was that we have, in the last 6 years, annually, 3,000 megawatt new renewable energy installations without large hydropower. Without large hydropower. Annually 3,000 megawatts. In more than 3,000 in the average. In 6 years, 20,000 megawatt altogether. We created a new industry with 150,000 new jobs. The windmill industry, PV industry, and biogas plant industry and others. We organized by that way a cost degression, because we arrived in the early beginning of mass production, and cost degression about 10% in the run of very few years, or 50% in the run of very few years. And we got, if you let me give one example, by this way, the cheapest renewable energies compared to the others. And in UK, they have a total other system. They have a system based not on a price regulation like we did it. They have a regulation in quantities. They oblige the renewable energy suppliers, the energy supplier, to take a specific percentage of energy from renewables into their supply. The result is many deviations for them. The result is that we have 20 times more installed wind energy capacity than UK. Although UK has better wind conditions than we. And the wind energy is cheaper in Germany than in UK. About 30% cheaper. This is a result of policy. Not the result of having better engineers, of having more diligent or more intelligent people. It's only a result of a different policy. And I assume the new ambitious targets within the United States, like California or some other states have now, because they don't want anymore to wait for a federal law. All these state targets and ambitions can only become matched with the right policy. And I have my doubts if the mostly used or introduced renewable energy portfolio standard policies will allow to match the official targets. And if there is the clear evaluation of policies shows you shall not leave it to the present energy sector. You shall not give them a veto power for the introduction of renewable energies, whether directly nor indirectly. And you must give the incentives for new players. And the general economic view about that is we can show already a lot of macroeconomic benefits by going to renewables, in contrast to the macroeconomic burdens, increasing macroeconomic burdens of the conventional energies. But economically, a macroeconomic benefit is not in the same time for all economic players a microeconomic benefit. Therefore, the political art is to translate, to transform with the right policy instruments the macroeconomic benefit into a microeconomic incentives for investors and customers. And if someone follows this line, he can create a dynamic process. And this dynamic process is needed to give an example which inspires others to do the same. We shall not wait for international negotiations. We have now, since 35 years, experiences of global energy conferences and environment conferences. Most of these conferences have only one result. This is a decision for organizing a follow-up conference. And at the same time, you have a rapid growth of the drama. And the number of participants increases, but the results are too low. And this is based on a wrong premise. The wrong premise of all these World Climate Conferences and other conferences is that the way from the conventional energy system as the source of the problems, the way to energy efficiency, and finally the way to another energy source, to renewable energies, that means to renewable energies, this way would be an economic burden. And therefore, such an economic burden should be carried by all or by none. This is a philosophy. And what is estimated as a burden leads to the bazaar of international negotiations and leads to the trying to get a broad consensus. And the broad consensus, this trying, is in a deep contradiction, methodologically, in a deep contradiction to the needs to have speed. It's in a deep, unbridgeable contradiction. And there is no example in history of modern technologies since 200 years in which a new technology which creates a new paradigm based on other calculations, which creates new opportunities apart from the former experiences. There's no example in history that a breakthrough of a technology came by an international treaty. Not one example. And therefore, we need the organization wherever there is enough human power to do that. Enough ambitions, enough commitment. The organization of such a dynamic process. We started that in this sense in Germany, and I think it would be fantastic if California could do the same, because the world needs such examples. And I want to close the speech with a sentence of the
Thank you very much. I'm sure your passion and deep insights into renewable energy policy making spark a lot of questions here in the audience. So please raise your hand and state your name and affiliation briefly before you start with your question.
Hi, my name's Brian Wong. I'm a computer consultant here in the Bay Area. Currently working on a contract at Visa. I have a question in regards to nuclear power. I think that coal is far worse than nuclear power, and I think that that the issues that you brought up in regards to nuclear power proliferation and the cost, you were indicating that the cost wasn't a factor for, shouldn't be considered for renewables, so then your cost arguments probably don't need to be addressed for nuclear. But that even though you got the 3 gigawatts per year in Germany, you still have coal power, which is killing, I think, 8,000 people per year in Germany, and that's from air pollution, you know, particulates and that kind of thing, causing heart disease and that kind of stuff. So because 1 million people a year die from the pollution from coal, shouldn't that be some kind of a priority issue to work at everything else, including nuclear, until we get rid of coal?
Yes, but perhaps you are right, but this is not the. Has nothing to do with my speech. What you have said, because I did not recommend coal instead of nuclear. I do not that. It is not a. It's not a good choice between. It's like having a choice between cancer and cholera. But nevertheless, we have between cancer and cholera. If you between nuclear cancer and fossil cholera. No, the alternative is renewable energies, and it is a myth. Always new distributed myth that we would need too much time to go to renewables. That is not right. It is totally wrong. Nothing can become implemented faster than renewable energies. Nothing. The 20,000 megawatt we have introduced in the last 6 years, the 20,000 new renewables, not large hydro involved in that number. If we would have, this is an energy equivalent from their annual production of perhaps 8,000 megawatt conventional power plants. Yeah? If there would have been, instead of the Renewable Energy Act in Germany, the decision to construct 8,000 megawatt reactors, if it is nuclear or coal, not one of them would work today. Because they have a construction time of 5, 6, sometimes 8, 10, 12 years. Not one would work, or perhaps only 1 or 2. And a windmill is installed within 1 week. And it's not an equivalent alone. It's not an equivalent to a big power station. But several hundred are an equivalent together. But each one module can work immediately after the installation. The big power station can only start to produce the first kilowatt hour when all things are constructed. And this example shows nothing can be done faster. It is possible if there is the adequate will and the awareness of a society about the real possibilities to come within 15 years to 100% renewable energy system in the electric power sector. Perhaps not in the field of fuels, if you think about the traffic, the cars, by replacing the fossil fuels by biofuels. Perhaps for this you need some more time, because you can make a lot of mistakes by doing that. A lot of environmental mistakes if it is not done well. But in the electric power sector, it is very easy to show a very fast development. Therefore, there is no reason to decide between coal or gas on the one side and nuclear on the other side. I think we need a moratorium for both. A moratorium for both, no new plants, no new coal plants, no new nuclear plants, and all future investments into renewable energies, or at least co-generation, decentralized co-generation, as long as some fossil fuels are involved. Nothing else. Then we have the right speed into the future.
If you could use the microphone, I'm
Yeah.
sure the people from the
okay.
filmmaking would appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Michael Schopenhauer. Great talk. I don't want to insult you, but some of the ideas that you're talking about are things that we already had about 20 years ago. The things about decentralization and stories about heat, power coupling, et cetera, those are ideas and concepts that were probably developed in the late 70s and the early 80s, and they were out there at that time. And we're now 20 years down the road. We really haven't seen too much technological progress on a lot of these things. These things are now being put in place when you're looking at Germany at a point in time where your power cost in Germany is about 65 cents per kilowatt hour. Our power cost in California is somewhere around 20 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour. So we have a serious issue in operating under similar economic attractivity scenarios as opposed to where Germany is. If our energy would be about twice the price, we probably would see more move towards photovoltaic, et cetera. But that doesn't really happen, and the energy cost in this state is not going to go up. So if you want to burn this down to what is supposed to happen in California, what concrete suggestions are there to do that? And in particular, the question is how and what can we do with using low temperature energy? How can we use that in a beneficial way? Because this is where the other problem is. When you're boiling down the systems as to something that is actually working, then you would, what is very efficient, the reason, the thermodynamic reason why the things that are happening in Germany do happen in Germany and do work in Germany is because you can do something with low temperature power. We can't really do a lot with that because we have a lot of sun in summer here, and people really don't have an interest in having more low temperature heat here in summer. So that is thermodynamically a problem in putting some of those heat power coupling units into the place here in California. Do you have any concrete suggestions or ideas about that one?
Yes, but to give an adequate answer requires to think about the special ways how to substitute the conventional energy structures. Because, not only because of the change of the energy basis, but also because of technological development in the society which change the kinds of energy demands. And the most important step in this way is that more and more electric power will substitute other energy sources, even in the conventional structure, more and more. Because of the technological development, information technologies lead in its mass introduction, and this happens, lead to more electric power demand. There's no doubt. But the biggest step comes by another development, and I expect this development in the run of the next 5 years, at least in the run of the next 10 years. I have no doubts that the car of the future will be an electric powered car. I have no doubts about that. All other options for the car, for fueling the car, are cannot match the benefits of an electric powered car. No other option. Because we have to look beyond fossil fuels for the cars, there's no doubt. And if we compare the different alternatives, hydrogen or biofuels, then I think all evaluations lead, if they are done in the comprehensive way, lead to electric powered car, and the electric power must be produced from renewables. Only then you get a clean city. Okay. You can get a CO2 neutral fuel by bioenergy, but you cannot clean the cities by that way. You can even not, and even hydrogen will create a problem for the cities, because they have also a kind of pollution that is steam. Burning hydrogen leads to a synthesis of oxygen in the air, yeah, and leads to water. You produce water by burning hydrogen. And this comes from out of the car in the form of steam. And if you do it in the countryside, it's no problem. But if you do it in the city like Los Angeles, or San Francisco, or New York, or Berlin, or London, or Paris, you will get so much air humidity, additional humidity, that this will overstress many people. There is no doubt about that. And a real clean city is only possible with individual traffic, with cars, with electric-powered cars. And the technological prerequisites to come to that are much closer to reality, to implementation, than all the other options. Much closer. Even in America, perhaps you have seen the movie Who Killed the Electric Car, which was shown some months ago in the United States. Who Killed the Electric Car? It is the automotive industry, cause of one reason why they forgot the technology of the electric car in the last decades. The working time of an internal combustion engine, like it is now in the cars, is not more than 4,000 hours. Between 3,000 and 4,000 hours, the real working time. The working time of an electric motor is up to 100,000 hours. And therefore, the difference between electric car, electric motor, and the internal combustion motor is for the industry very, very relevant. That is the reason why the automotive industry hesitates to do that what is reasonable, or hesitated to develop that. But one producer will start with that, and then he will win. Look to the hybrid car from Toyota. This is a step to that direction. It's not the final solution. It is a step to that. And Toyota became the most successful automobile producer in the world because of that. And the automotive industry who misses that will create a lot of dangers for the societies which are dependent on such industries, like Germany, like the United States of America. Okay, that means in general you will have more electric power needs replacing other energy demands. And based on that, we can have enough fantasy for the perspective in which the heating and cooling of buildings will come by direct solar radiation use, mostly. Mostly. The cars will become fueled by electric power, and the electric power needs from the day will remain. And in this field, a lot of new technologies will come or will become introduced. Some we don't know, but even that what we know is enough to show a full perspective. With low temperature, it will also become possible to produce electric power. One option is the Stirling engine. With the Stirling engine you can produce electric power with 60 or 70 degrees Celsius, with 50 or 60 or 70 degrees. And if you take cogeneration, perhaps based on biomass, or biogas mainly, then you can come from the power and heat production to power, heat, and power production. 3 steps from one source. The creation of a renewable energy system leads to a new variety of a new diversity of energy technologies. I suppose it is the really second industrial revolution. The first was driven by the steam engine, and then the fossil fuel economy. The second will come by that way. And it is impossible to show all the branches which will become developed by that today. You can give a roughly imagination of that.
Sorry, unfortunately, we only have time for one more question since we want to get all the people who are helping here on the Google side out in time. I'm happy to introduce Edgar Gunther, who's writing an excellent solar blog. Those of you who haven't read it yet should definitely start to have a look at it either tonight or tomorrow morning.
Thank you. I really didn't have a question. I was looking through my notes.
Oh, okay. No?
I mean, I'll try to.
Then I got it wrong. Then it's you had a question, right?
I did, yes. It's a brief one. My name is Dana Sanderson. Thank you. This was very informative and exciting this evening. Are you currently in any dialogue with the Schwarzenegger administration here in California? Have there been any contact between your organizations and the California solar policymakers? Can we be hopeful of that?
I was invited 2 years ago when the first legislation was introduced, and I gave a speech in the Capitol in Sacramento. I had also a meeting with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I am in contact with the head of the California Energy Commission, John Giesman. And perhaps I will have a meeting with him in the next days. It depends on the different agendas. I met him 2 months ago in Washington, and my running argument is don't take care anymore about the claims of the present energy companies, and make a full step to a price regulation like we have it with the Renewable Energy Act. And then I'm totally sure that you will get a dynamic, a larger dynamic than we have, because we have, in some cases, better conditions than we. You have a longer coast than Germany, with more wind than we have, and you have several, I think, what is the average of the solar radiation per square meter in California? Twice, that means 2,000. 2,000 hours, yeah? 1,800. 2,000 kilowatt hours per square meter, 1,800. We have in the average 1,100. And the costs would be the same for the technology. Then you can imagine what could happen in California. And I have a big hope that this will happen, because it's not good to be alone in a front-running situation, because more and more arguments we have around you should not you isolate yourself and all these things. It is necessary to have alliance for that. That means states who do the same, with the same ambition, with adequate policies, and who can create the same dynamic development. I think, therefore, I would appreciate totally if it would happen here, and what I can do to inspire that, I do. That's why I'm here.
Please join me in thanking Hermann for this great speech. And before closing here, let me just make a few remarks. Well, thanks again so much for the MIT CNC Club for organizing this together with us. This was a truly great experience with you guys. I want to briefly mention Vote Solar, the Rahus Institute, and also the German American Chamber of Commerce, who's also helped promoting this. And I want to draw your attention to an event that the German American Chamber, and maybe Stefan, you want to stand up 1 second and identify yourself, organizes with our support, which is the German California Solar Day, which is going to happen in March 13th, I believe it is, in San Francisco. So unfortunately, Hermann is not going to be there, but lots of interesting German and California solar companies and some policymakers. And in saying that, let me close. We have Energy Autonomy, Hermann's latest book here, which we're selling and which I'm sure he's happy to sign. And it would be great if we could, thank our hosts here at Google by trying to be out of here by 9 o'clock or just after 9. I know they have a lot of people here helping us and supporting us, and I'm sure they would appreciate that a lot. Thanks again to all of you for coming here, and bye-bye.